But open primaries undermine party affiliation and voter participation. So if you are feeling as a serious party advocate and insider like you're not as powerful in advancing a nominee for your party, maybe you'll feel a little bit more disenfranchised or just disheartened by that process and therefore remove yourself a little bit more. Open primaries disincentivize engagement by core party activists. So that's the argument I just made. Open primaries lower turnout by eliminating clear choices. So when there's not as extreme of a choice between a, let's say left-wing Democrat and a right-wing Republican, there aren't as many passions being swung back and forth in debates leading up to the election, and therefore there's less interest, let's say, and it's up more to kind of these subtle nuances and things that most voters might not care about that will actually get them out to the polls. So third parties, do open primaries help or hurt third parties? Open primaries let independents, third-party voters participate. Already went over that argument, but I'll read a quote. This is from Bob Stern. Quote, "I want every vote to count, and right now there is very little incentive for registered independents to vote in primaries because they have to request a Democratic or Republican ballot." So another pro, open primaries lend credibility to third-party candidates in general elections. So if in the event that a third-party candidate and a Green Party candidate advances through their primary in the top two system to the general election, they'll have a lot of credibility, and maybe this will allow them to actually win in the general election versus what exists now in closed primaries where, sure, they're on the general election ballot, but nobody really gives them any notice because they were just advanced by their own party, not by a broader base of voters. But open primaries push third parties out of the general elections. So because it is so much harder for these third-party candidates to actually win in the primary, it is much less likely that they'll advance to the general election, and that means that you'll just see fewer third-party candidates in the general election. That could be a bad thing. It could be a bad thing just for their PR, because it's good for them to be seen on the general ballot. If people want choice in a party, they should join that party. So why are we catering to independents that want a choice when they have a choice? They have a choice to leave their independent status or their Green Party membership and join a Democratic Party or Republican Party. They have that choice to do so. If they feel disenfranchised, they can change that. Now, as far as moderation, do open primaries promote moderates over extremes? This is one of the core debates in this larger debate. Open primaries favor moderate, pragmatic candidates. So openprimaries.org says, quote, "Open primaries encourage candidates with a broad appeal who favor pragmatic rather than partisan solutions. They allow for the development of new coalitions of voters and candidates." So yeah, this is maybe a good thing when you have more nuance, people crossing from independent and Republican, sides to vote for a Democratic candidate in the nomination process. Maybe this will moderate the general election process. Maybe that's a good thing. There's a lot of polarization in America and other countries. Maybe that's not a good thing. Closed primaries have political extremes determine nominees. So what's happening right now in the primary process is the ones that are involved, the major advocates, the political insiders, are more extreme and they're just more involved, and so they're determining the nominees. So the general election, you have left versus far right. Maybe not a good thing. Open primaries can spur new and moderate coalitions. So by shaking things up in the middle, you can have certain cross coalitions, maybe bipartisanship between Republicans and Democrats or even other parties. Open primaries ends the us versus them environment. I think that's self-explanatory as far as what I've already said. Open primaries increase bipartisan productivity in government. So by increasing the bipartisanship through more moderate candidates and ultimate politicians, you'll have people that are more likely to actually get stuff done and work together and be pragmatic. But on the con side, open primaries produce moderate candidates that lack core beliefs. So if you really want your candidate, your Democratic candidate, to have those core democratic values and principles, shouldn't you be having insider say in that process? If you have independents and Republicans voting for that Democratic nominee, they're not going to be as core Democratic as you might like as a Democrat. Closed primaries place a check on centrism in general elections. So, if we think centrism is bad, closed primaries place a check on that so that you have real choices. Open primaries will make politics more bland. So it's exciting when there are extremes, maybe we can say. It builds a lot of passion in the electoral process because people are really fighting against what they believe is wrong, and they believe it's really wrong, so they'll really fight hard for it. Maybe we don't want to lose that. Now, the right to free association, are open primaries consistent with the right of free association? Huge argument in this debate. Primaries too important. So I'll read the main argument here. Open primaries violate right of free association. This one guy, Ken Cuccinelli, who is a state senator in Fairfax, he's a Republican, said in opposition to open primaries, "Why on earth would anyone think that my opponents have any right to pick my nominee? The Washington Redskins don't let the Dallas Cowboys in their huddle when they're calling plays." I like the analogy. So I have a right to freely associate with any organization that I want, and then to, in that free association, be insular as far as who we want to make our leaders of that association. Open primaries to some extent violates this by letting outsiders come in and select our nominee for the Democratic Party or Republican Party. Primaries are internal matters for party to choose best candidate. So same argument, just a different way to say it. And the general election is open. Why do we need to make the primaries open as well? So we are trying to include everybody in the electoral process, obviously, through the general election, but the primary election is just for internal use to nominate the nominee. But primaries are too important in a democracy to just be internal matters. Like I've said before, they're often actually what's determining the outcome of the election, the actual politician that you'll have as your leader. So is it good to exclude a large base of your potential future constituency from actually voting you as the nominee? Potentially not. Yeah, sure, people have a choice in the general election, but maybe they really won't because the Republican candidate only typically gets about 20% of the vote, and that just demographically won't be changing. So if the primaries are so important to democracy, inclusiveness might be as well, and it might override the value of this so-called right to free association.